everybody, JJ here with ASUS, and excited to kick off this stream that we're going to be doing in terms of talking about some awesome ROG gaming mice. So for those of you that are aware, ROG has had a really big kind of peripheral lineup now that we've expanded into from especially the last year and now into 2021. And we thought it would be a great time to actually dive into a really cool and innovative feature that we've actually had since the very first kind of hero mouse that we launched, which is going to be this guy right here, the original Gladius I. And so this actually launched all the way back, I think 2014 was the original launch for this one. And even at this time, it was a very innovative mouse. We looked at a lot of different things that kind of the people were looking at for in the community, whether it was things like improving the overall kind of fit and feel and construction of the mouse, things like trying to mitigate and resolve issues with phantom clicks or double clicks. And that was actually the big focus for what we're going to be talking about in this stream, which was the implementation of our ROG-exclusive very innovative push fit socket design, which we're now kind of relabeling and reterming as our hot swap push fit socket design. That alongside things with like a detachable cable and you know, good quality, of course, optical sensor and a lot of other elements were really kind of the driving hallmark for this mouse. But now we move over into 2020, 2021, and you see that actually we've got 4 different mice here, and really kind of the goal here is to hopefully give you guys a little bit of insight in terms of why you might want to go about changing out your switch, and also as far as, you know, what are going to be some of the benefits, and then actually what's the experience like if you jump into each one of these mice and you go about actually customizing the switch. And we'll talk about, you know, which switches are going to be compatible, some different items that you're going to want to keep in mind. And we're also going to talk about this guy right here, the upcoming Gladius III, which will offer a first for really the industry in terms of not only offering our swappable design in terms of a hot swap push fit design, but our version 2, which is going to allow you to use a mechanical switch or an optical switch. So when you really talk about kind of flexibility and really allowing yourself to have the most performance, this is going to really be, I think, a really awesome option. So first things first, thanks for everybody joining the stream. Appreciate it, guys. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to go ahead and drop in the chat. We also have Van, one of my fellow colleagues from the ASUS team. He's there wrangling around. So if you guys have any questions or comments, throw them in there. I'll do my best to go ahead and check it out as I can see them. And we can answer you guys' questions if it's anything relating to the different mice that we've got here and kind of push fit design and kind of swapping out your switches in general. So first things first, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about, well, what are we referring to when we actually talk about a switch in a mouse? Now, many of you are probably kind of familiar that, of course, if you take a look at something like a keyboard, you know, many of you are familiar with something like the switches on a keyboard. And here, fundamentally, we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about an input option. Essentially, there's a small little switch that you have that is underneath both the left and right buttons. And when they're normally depressed, that's actually what creates the input signal gets passed through. And these switches, just like on a keyboard, can have a wide range of kind of different experiences. You can have actually some switches that are harder, and they have actually a higher level in terms of what's called the operating force requirement, and some that are going to be smoother and quicker. So depending on kind of how large your hand is, how fast you're kind of clicking, as well as even kind of other elements like the construction quality, how they're designed to actually block out things like moisture, dust, debris, and dander. Plating that's utilized in the switch, a lot of these things can affect the durability. And so when we talk about kind of the experience of a mouse, the switch really affects a lot of it. So let's go ahead and actually take a little bit of a closer look here and show you a little bit of kind of what the switch is in general. So give me 1 second here. I'm going to go ahead and load up an image for you guys so you can take a look right here. So this right here is actually the inside, and we're going to go ahead and take a little bit of a closer look. But when I'm talking actually about the switch, this little mechanism right there is the actual exposed portion. So this essentially plunger, when you depress it, this is actually what is making everything happen. And we're going to talk a lot more about actually how there's different types of platings that can improve the durability, like what we have in our ROG Micro Switch, as well as also how this actually goes about in terms of affecting the experience when you go about changing out your switches in general. So first things first is, you know, let's talk a little bit about why you actually might want to change out your switches, right? Why do we when we first essentially developed this guy right here, the original Gladius, what was the original intent and kind of the original focus? So first things first, when it goes about kind of why you might approach this, one, historically, it's not something that's uncommon. You know, switches over time, they have an actual rated lifespan. So it can be like 1 million clicks, it could be 5 million clicks, 20 million clicks, or like our ROG Micro Switch, 70 million clicks. So depending on that lifespan and depending on things like the humidity, And depending on things like ingress, so what I mean by ingress is actually how something might get on the inside of this switch, which could be like dust, debris, dander, humidity, things like that can affect the overall reliability. So what you found is that sometimes people end up over time having what they would call like double click syndrome, or it might be like phantom clicks. Essentially, they go to kind of click the mouse and it's maybe not as responsive or requires them kind of double clicking and they're missing kind of inputs. And so what people used to in the past have to do is disassemble their mouse, and they would have to use something like this guy right here. This is essentially a soldering iron, and they would pretty much have to disassemble the mouse carefully, make sure that it actually was designed to be disassembled. A lot of mice weren't necessarily designed to be disassembled. And then from there, you would have to use this soldering iron, and then you would have to essentially remove the switch, and then you would resolder your new switch. Now, that's not necessarily super complicated. I myself, I've done some soldering, but some people, that's of course, you know, a big reach for them. It might be something that they're not familiar with, they're not comfortable with, and it can be potentially dangerous. You can actually damage the PCB board. You could burn the components. You have to be cautious actually with fumes, so you would want to use it in a well-ventilated area. And then there's the investment in the actual items that you would need. Ideally, at a minimum, you would want a reasonably good quality soldering iron. You might actually need a couple of other items as well as the actual pickup, the actual solder once it's become molten, and some other things. So you could be talking about, you know, easily conservative about $40 in base kind of items just to repair the mouse. So many users sometimes would fundamentally end up going, well, I'm just going to buy a new mouse, right? As opposed to kind of changing out the switches, even though that might have been the only thing that you needed to do. And so when we first kind of designed that, our goal was, well, how could we make that process easier for the user? And that's ultimately what we designed and we put in place with the ROG push fit socket design. So I'm going to actually show you what I'm talking about here. And it's gone through a couple of different versions since the very first version here. This is actually a close-up shot right here. You can actually see the actual socket itself. So this is the actual place where the switch mounts directly inside of the mouse. And so the big thing that we actually did here that's different is that as opposed to essentially requiring you to have to solder essentially your switch in place, you can essentially just remove it. It's essentially a push fit based design. You can pull it out and you can push it back in. So it's a far simpler process in terms of ultimately having access to be able to change out your switch. And that's what we essentially designed and implemented. And that gives you much more flexibility because you can pick up a good quality switch for a couple dollars. You know, it depends on where you purchase them from, but in most situations, it's probably going to cost you, I'd say, under $5 easily, and that would probably be for a pack of a couple of switches. You know, of course, better quality switches are going to be a little bit more expensive, but the great thing is that you have the choice, right? You have the flexibility. So one was just the ability to be able to repair your actual mouse and be able to overall enhance the overall long-term reliability because you were able to customize that. The secondary thing that has now also though evolved over time is that we've seen as gamers that we want more choice, we want more flexibility, we want the ability to kind of customize based on what our preference is in. So you can see right here, I've got quite a number of different kind of mice. So I've got something like a larger mouse here, which is the ROG Chakram. And then I've got something like a much lighter weight mouse, which would be like here, like the KERIS. So, you know, talk about one that's going to be over, you know, 100 grams, and then you're going to have one that's going to be under 80 grams, right? And then even our ultra lightweight KERIS, 62 grams, right? Those favor different types of users, different type of setups, you know, different types of ways that you play your game. And in that same type of scenario, you might find that maybe one switch is a better experience for you. You might find that maybe you've got a heavier hand and you want a switch that's going to be a little bit harder so that you can essentially make sure to not have miscues. Maybe your hand is just kind of resting there on the mouse and you want to be able to reduce the likelihood of that being a concern. So maybe you want to go for heavier actuation force. You want a heavier operational force. Or maybe you've got smaller hands and you've got a very light touch and maybe you want it to be as fast as possible. You really want to drive your kind of CPS, right? So in that regard, you might want to just be able to change it out. So that is kind of now where we've progressed forward, where you know, when we talk about the overall reliability, wide range of the ROG mice that we have, we're using, you know, high quality Omron switches, rated, you know, 50 million clicks, 70 million clicks. So the key aspect in terms of kind of the reliability is not so much a concern anymore. But regardless, you're going to have the flexibility to be able to swap it out in a year if maybe something just happens, right? And you just want to be able to get back up and running, or again, if you want that customization experience. So I would say those are kind of the two key elements that you would want to keep in mind, is that you're going to have the ability to just be able to easily repair your mouse in the event that you need to, and it'll help to extend its lifespan. And then the secondary element is going to be the customization experience. So those are really kind of the two different options that you have available to you, and it goes about why you would want to have access to being able to change out your switch, right? So the next one I touched on a little bit, right? But is going to be, again, kind of reinforcing that for this, you're not going to need a soldering iron. So if you've ever kind of Googled anything on the internet, you've kind of jumped into a forum, you've seen different posts in different communities where they've talked about, hey, you just need, a soldering iron, you need a little setup area, go ahead and have everything set up. This is not what you're going to need. You can pretty much not have to worry about this. So on pretty much any one of our mice, whether you're talking about the Gladius series, the Chakram series, the KERIS series, Pugio series, the Spata series, they all support our push-fit based design. They will have a little bit different versions in terms of how you will go about the process of disassembling them, but fundamentally it means all of them are going to allow for a solder-free experience. So no soldering is required. So what do you really need? It's going to be pretty simple. I will actually show you here. In terms of kind of the base items, one, you're going to need something to extract the switch, which you can actually do with your fingers. If you got really good dexterity, just use your fingers. But we do include this cool little tool. The little tool will allow you to go ahead and pull that out. Secondary to that, you are going to want a screwdriver. I generally recommend a PH0, so a 0 rated Phillips screwdriver is what you will need for disassembly of the mouse. You can do it with the PH1, but generally PH0 would be preferred. And then you might want to have something like a utility knife or utility blade. And this might just make it a little bit easier to pull out the grommet that will be essentially covering the screw that we'll need to go ahead and remove so that we can access the inside of the mouse. And we're actually going to go through the entirety of that process, so don't worry about that, guys. We're actually going to show you some really good close-ups and exactly how it works across each one of these mice if you have any questions on how the disassembly process goes through. But ultimately, really, all you really need is just going to be a screwdriver, and that's it. That's all you're going to require along with your switch. You don't need anything else. And even in terms of the utility knife, if you don't feel comfortable with that, if you've got a small flathead screwdriver, that can also work really well as far as helping you to just prop out the grommet that essentially covers, again, the screw that you're going to have there on the mouse. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually dump into the actual first model that we're going to go ahead and talk about a little bit, and also help to kind of give you the foundation of Push Fit 1 ultimately versus what we've now released with our upcoming mouse in Push Fit 2, which is going to be on the Gladius III. So the first mouse that we're going to go ahead and focus in on here is going to be this guy, and this is going to be the Gladius II, Gladius II CORE. All right, and so this guy right here, $49.99. It's a fantastic mouse, high quality optical based sensor. You have that ability in terms of being able to customize the switches. It's got a really good feel to it in terms of, if you want to go for traditional kind of palm, claw, or fingertip, you can really kind of work with this mouse in a lot of different ways. Very, very good in terms of the overall kind of construction and feel. Good acceleration in terms of the feet. There's not really any kind of key item that I feel kind of holds back. If you're overall kind of looking just for a good quality mouse that, as I'd say moderate in terms of the weight, it's not, I'd say, a heavyweight mouse, but it's definitely not as lightweight as something like what we're going to have with the Gladius III or the KERIS, but a good all-around option. This is going to be the first model that we're going to go ahead and take a look at, and I will show you actually how it works. Again, we're going to go through each one of these mice, but for clarity purposes, it is important to understand that there are two versions of essentially our design that we have in place. Push Fit 2, which is going to be on the Gladius III, and then Push Fit 1, which you're going to have essentially on all the other mice. And the main difference there is that we've gone ahead and done some aspects in terms of improving the overall kind of wobble performance to have it be just a little bit tighter and feel a little bit better. And then secondary to that, you're also going to have the ability to support both the 5-pin and 3-pin based micro switches. So one is going to be the 5-pin, which is going to be the Omron optical switches, and then 3-pin would be your traditional micro switches, which there's tons of different micro switches. In case you're kind of wondering here, I can just show you a little bit of kind of the general landscape in terms of what we've got for micro switches. And you can actually see right there, these are just some of the different options that you have available to you. Now, in terms of validation, we've currently only validated the Omron-based switches, D series, and I'll talk a little bit more as far as specifically which are the switches that we're going to be talking about. But all these switches right here, actually all will be able to be swapped in there. So you really do have kind of a lot of choice, and there's actually even more than that. You know, probably in totality, if we took a look at maybe all the different micro switches that could really fit in here, that you could try out. And again, there is a difference between what we've officially validated and other models that you can try out. We'd love to hear your feedback if you want us to go through more extensive validation before it gets added into our formal kind of control table. Probably would be somewhere 20 plus different switches that you could really kind of dive into and kind of try different things out. So let me go ahead and show you here. So we're going to take our Gladius II, and I will show you what it looks like. So you can see right here, that is going to be the grommet. Now you can see I've gone ahead and already removed one of them right there. There's already one removed. So 2 screws are essentially already been removed. But if you're going to do this live, all you would need to do is just pull that out right there. And then pull that one out right there. So you can see you've got 2 screws that are right there. Then you're just going to take your screwdriver. And tip, if you've got a magnetizer, you can magnetize the tip of your screwdriver. If it's not a magnetic screwdriver, you can demagnetize it, and then you can use something like a magnetic tray. So you can see that's really all that's required. You remove the actual rubber grommet, and then you've got your screw, okay? And there would be a total of 4. Depending on the mouse, it's a little bit different. Then you're going to pull off your shell, and from there, that's it. You can see right here now you've got access to the 2 switches. So you have one for the left and one for the right. So the next step for this one, this is the Gladius II. Just go ahead and pull that out. And you've now gone ahead and removed that. And so from there, if you want to go ahead and swap in a different switch, just going to use this for example. I'm going to go ahead and here we have our ROG Micro Switch. Now this one you can't purchase. It is currently exclusively only bundled with certain ROG mice. But you can see it slots in there. And that's pretty much all you would need to do. From there, you put your shell back on and complete your screws. So very, very simple process in terms of, you can see, having access to the internal body and then having access to the actual socket-based mechanism. Now I'm going to go a little bit closer, and I want to show you some of the key kind of differences between push socket 1 and push socket 2 before I get to some of the other mice and how you actually go about the disassembly process. And I wanted to see if anybody kind of has any basic questions right there in terms of kind of how that experience kind of went through. But as you can see, it's really, really simple and really, really straightforward. So again, let's go ahead and take a closer look here. We can see we have push fit 1 on the left, and then we have push fit version 2 on the right. And so you can see actually on push fit 2, you have the traditional 3-pin, right? And you can also see that we've updated actually a nice little kind of little diagram to let you know actually where the button actually is in coordination with a plunger. So this is important because actually if you were to solder, you actually could put the switch in backwards, and then you would have to desolder it, and then you would have to reorientate it, and then go ahead and do it again. So here we actually give you a little diagram to let you know, hey, this is the right way to go ahead and put it. And you can also see that we've got completed a little bit of a box frame, whereas on the left-hand side, you can actually see it's a little bit of an open frame, which created a little bit more wobble. But there is another little element here that I'm actually going to show you guys here as a quick tip if you go about kind of customizing the experience. But let's go ahead and just show you some of the other kind of secondary images here. So here you can see this is a close-up of the push fit 1, right? And you can see there that at the top and at the bottom there's a little bit of an exposed area, so that's a keyway. And you can see that you've got essentially the 3 points that allow the actual switch to be inserted. And you pretty much just have to push it down. That's all you need to do. Okay, a little bit of a different angle right there that allows you to kind of see, again, where it's positioned. This is going to be for the left and for the right. And then here, when we compare this to version 2, you can see version 2 has a little bit more of a housing. And so essentially the housing just helps to add overall kind of structural rigidity, and also, like I said, allow for a reduction in terms of the wobble for the switch. And there's a same shot there, but just from a little bit of a different angle for the version 2. So you're able to see that kind of that compare and the contrast. And there, right there, you can see the difference between the switch being present and the switch not being present, right? All right, so there we go. So you can see here, this is the Omron switch that we have. It's rated for 50 million clicks, but we have on the default switch, this is important, there's right here at the bottom, a little spacer that you can pull off. If you can see right there, I went ahead and pulled it off. Right there. And that little spacer is actually one that you can use on other switches in the event that the switch has a little bit of a Z height difference, okay? So you would want to go ahead and use that in the event that you find that you want it to be maybe a little bit tighter, or the switch right here is a little bit off in terms of kind of its Z height. Overall, they should generally be pretty similar. But that is a little kind of a special touch point, and it's not actually fully detailed there. So that is a kind of just a little quick tip that if you want to go through the process of kind of customizing it, this is a cool option that you have available to you. And then pretty much all you need to do is take that little spacer and then kind of re-put it back in place. It has a little bit of adhesive, so you want to kind of minimize you pulling it off and touching the side that has the adhesive. And then again, you can see right here, I've got the mouse. I'm going to go ahead and pull out that ROG Micro Switch that I had there and pop it back in place, and that's it. That's all you're going to need to do. Now, we did talk about earlier that we are calling this our hot swap. Now, it's important to kind of understand that hot swap technically actually has the requirement of meaning that you would be able to do it live when essentially the unit is plugged in and it has power. That is possible. You can do this hot swap, whether it's going to be on a wired mouse or whether it's going to be on a wireless mouse. They both will work in that capacity. But as always, I do recommend, if you want to be a little bit extra cautious and a little bit mindful, go ahead and just disconnect the mouse and do this not with the mouse live, as well as if you had a wireless based mouse, just go ahead and just turn it off. It's not a 100% requirement, but it would be my recommendation. But you can go ahead and perform the actual switch replacement live if you do want to do that. And then from there, you can see here, for just my Gladius II Core, I am just putting back in the grommets and the screws. That's it. So pretty straightforward. So that's our first mouse that we've gone ahead and done this with here. Okay, so that is the Gladius II Core, guys. Okay, so again, if you guys want to check that guy out, $49.99 in terms of the price. You can get that mouse available right now. And again, like I said, very, very simple process in terms of accessing the push-fit based design. So our next up is going to be right here with the ROG CHAKRAM CORE. This is a fairly recent addition to our lineup, really well suited for a little bit larger hands. As you can see, it has a little bit of an extended wrist, a little bit of an extended design here. There you can see it right here. This is the wired model. We do also have it in a wireless model, tri-mode, so you can do it in terms of 2.4 gigahertz. You can go with, of course, wired, or you can go with Bluetooth, so you have a lot of flexibility. One of the really cool things on this model too, though, is that it actually has an actual joystick that's on the side that can be programmed for different types of levels of functionality, which is really cool. And you can also go ahead and swap that off on actually different models. So it does give you a little bit of flexibility depending on how you want to tailor kind of the mouse to your setup. You have that flexibility. But the thing that I really love about this is not only its performance, this is actually an NVIDIA Reflex certified based mouse. So outstanding in terms of extremely low latency, actually sub 1 millisecond latency in the wired mode configuration, which this one is. But this one is even going to be simpler than what we have to do on the Gladius II. So one of the really, really cool things about the CHAKRAM Core is that it is effectively toolless. So it has an actual shell-based design, and it's very simple. So I'm going to just show this in general shot, but we'll get a little bit closer. But you can see right here, it has a cool detachable magnetic shell that can be removed. And then these two items, which can also then be removed. So we're going to go ahead and do this on a little bit of a close-up shot for you guys. You can see how it goes. But this one means you don't even need to use any tools. There we go. So you can see here we've got the CHAKRAM Core. And first part is just going to be to pull that shell off. Very, very simple. You can see right there, there's the magnet that holds this portion in play. And that actually allows for some cool customization right here. This little portion lights up. And you can see this right here. This is also something that you would pull off. Again, it's held in place by magnets. So you're just going to go ahead and remove that. And right there, you can actually see the switch. So there's the switch right there. And let me see if I can turn that around. And you can see, pull the switch out, say maybe I want to go for something a little bit different here. And there you can see I've inserted a different switch. And now I'm good to go. And from there, you just go ahead and snap those items back in place. And we've successfully reassembled the Chakram. So you can see this one's even simpler, right? Again, we've tried to do a lot in terms of really kind of having, I think, a very functional design that feels really still good in hand, so it doesn't feel like anything's going to creak. And that's the great thing about the Chakram Core. It's got a really, really nice feel in it. Works really well. I'm about 6'2", about 210, and I've got fairly large hands. So this mouse really fits me well in terms of just giving me a little bit of something that's got a little bit more comfort across the base of my palm, and then also a little bit of a rest area for your thumb. So I find that that's a little bit more of a challenge for people that have bigger hands, as opposed to something like what you might have with like the KERIS, which is going to be a little bit more compact. And so it tends to kind of favor people that might be using a little bit more of kind of a claw grip, a little bit more maybe of a fingertip type style than necessarily a palm type style base setup. But the cool thing is, again, you have that flexibility to easily swap out your switches on this unit with no tools whatsoever. So really slick, really easy, and really just nice in terms of the overall kind of usability of it. So let's go ahead and jump over to our next mouse. And so this one is a very recent update, and this is going to be for the KERIS. This is going to, or some people refer to it KERIS. Kind of little cool naming convention. If you guys aren't necessarily aware, all of the ROG mice, they're actually named after kind of a historical armament, or essentially weaponry. So like the Gladius was actually a sword, right? And so same thing, these are all some form of kind of armaments. And so that kind of plays back a little bit into also why the software is called Armory, or now called Armory Crate. So it kind of plays in a little bit with kind of the naming convention. So this is really focused at kind of a lightweight based design, really I think centric to individuals that want high level CPS based performance. And so even on this model, some of the cool things that we did is if we actually go do a little bit of secondary shot here, sorry, these are actually PBT. So traditionally in a mouse, right, if we put these side by side right here, the coating that you're going to be using is going to be the same for both the left and the right, as well as the shell. But what we did here is we know that these are actually going to be high endurance requirements. So we actually are testing out, and we'd love to get people's feedback on actually utilizing PBT, which is historically really a much higher grade material in terms of its resistance against kind of buildup of kind of having shine or sheen or essentially wear over time. That's the reason why if you get like a premium keyboard, you can get PBT keycaps, and those keycaps will essentially have very, very good legend performance. They essentially won't wear, they're not gonna have that sheen or kind of that shiny kind of effect. And so because you're clicking so often on these, this is something that we've now introduced here on this model, where the rest of the body, of course, isn't PBT, but that is something that is present there. So that's pretty cool. This one is a tri-mode based mouse. So you're gonna have the 2.4 gigahertz low latency, 1 millisecond. You're gonna have your USB-C connection, and then you're also gonna have your Bluetooth connection. And we just actually launched right now the ultra lightweight model, 62 grams, which is the wired based version. So if you really want a super light based mouse, that's going to be a great option. And both the wireless and the wired version will support the push fit based socket design. So we'll give you a little bit of a close-up shot right there. You can see right there, it's the KERIS wireless. So here we're just going to go through again the disassembly process, show you what it looks like for this model right here. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Okay, so let's go ahead and again go to our secondary cam and show you what the experience is like when it comes to the disassembly for this guy. All right, and so you can see right here, same thing. I'm just going to use my utility knife. I'm going to take out the grommet. And this one you can see compared to the Gladius II CORE only has two grommets and 2 screws. So it's even a little bit less of a requirement. Not as simple as the Chakram, which is 100% tool free, but very, very easy, very, very simple. All right, guys, so we can see right there, we've got those 2 removed. Just pull out from the shell. And there you go. And you can see now these have our ROG Micro Switch already. So that's a really cool thing. And we're going to actually go in a little bit more to help you understand actually some of the design differences when you talk about different switches and the advantage that we have with our actually ROG Micro Switch. Okay. But if we did want to go ahead and swap this out, take for instance, again, we just pull that out and you go towards different micro switch right here, slot it in, and that's it. We're good to go. So very, very simple process, right? So let's go ahead and actually talk a little bit about this guy, right? So this is actually something that launched here recently with the model like what we have here with the KERIS or the KERIS, which is going to be our ROG Micro Switch. So this is the first time we've actually released our own switch as opposed to just your standard Omron switches, which was what we've included with many of our other mice. And the goal actually with that micro switch was really to, I think, offer something that was going to offer a high level of performance, of course, in line with ROG, and also some kind of design-focused elements. So let's go ahead and actually take a little bit of a closer look here at this switch. There you guys go. There you can see the ROG Micro Switch. It's got a cool little kind of red translucent housing. I'll show you guys some photos right here in a moment. But the first thing is going to be, this one is going to be rated for 70 million clicks. So that's going to be quite a bit more than what you would have with a traditional base switch in terms of its overall lifespan. So that's going to be helping you just feel really confident that literally for years, you can feel very confident in terms of its overall performance. But it doesn't stop there. There are actually going to be some tolerance improvements. So what not a people less necessarily understand is that there actually can be what's called deviance, or essentially a differential in terms of the actual force deviance, or essentially the force actuation between your left and your right. So when you get your mouse, you can actually have, it could be 10, could be 15 grams. It could actually be a fairly sizable difference between the left and the right. And ideally, you want there to be a fairly kind of consistent experience between the two so that they feel kind of as responsive as possible. And so this is going to be another kind of key benefit of the ROG Micro Switch, which is going to be that we actually have a tighter tolerance. So during production and when it gets implemented in our mouse, we have actually a very tight target to have actually a lower than industry standard, essentially, force deviation for these switches. And essentially that deviation is going to be another point, because that is a little bit more of a costly process to go through and be able to go ahead and ensure that essentially that tighter tolerance and that tighter level of consistency between the two essentially switches that you have between the left side, and then between the right-hand side. Okay. Here you can see that they're installed, so that's going to be for both the left and for the right-hand side. Now, another item is actually going to be the inside of the switch itself. There can actually be different types of materials that are used, so different types of metal alloy materials that are utilized, and that can actually affect the long-term reliability of the switch. And why is that going to be important? Well, you can actually see right here an exposed switch. And so we'll get a little bit closer here. I can give this to you a secondary shot, but this is quite a good shot right here, where that internal material, if you actually have a plating for the material, take for instance here, we have it electroplated, this gold plating is actually going to help to reduce oxidation. That's really important because actually one of the reasons is that over time, when you actually actuate the switch, so here we can actually show you what that would look like. Right, we took a look at this video a little bit earlier, right? But when you actually are actuating that over time, if there's an ingress of essentially humidity or different things that kind of settle on that, it can cause that portion to fail or essentially break down over time. That can be one of the reasons why you can get things like double clicks and things along those lines. So the great thing is here is that the ROG Micro Switch already essentially has that high quality plating in place to be able to ensure essentially better performance and better experience, better durability, and overall better reliability. So, you make a little bit more investment, of course, in a mouse that's going to come equipped with the micro switch, but you're going to get that long lifespan, 70 million clicks. You're going to get that ideal kind of force consistency between the left and the right, and then you're going to have that plating. So you're going to have a really great experience. And also, I love their overall kind of their sound to them. So, see, yeah, I've got it right here. See if I can be quiet. Let me see if you guys can tell it. I don't have it screwed in, so give me 1 second here. But it has a really nice, audible, clean, consistent click. So as you're going through, it sounds really nice. But that is kind of one of the other things. Really clean, really consistent, crisp. I love these ROG micro switches. But that's another element is that, again, if maybe you want something a little bit more damped, a little bit quieter, you can go ahead and customize to use different types of switches that are even a little bit softer and a little bit more quiet. And I'm going to give you a JJ tip. While they're not 100% just out-of-box compatible, you can actually find what are called silent micro switches. And the silent micro switches are almost inaudible. I will tell you, it requires a little bit of work. You're going to have to get some sandpaper or a little bit of a file. You'll have to file down the switch, but you can actually do a little bit of a hack and get them to actually work inside of our mice, so that if you're somebody that wants super quiet mouse clicks, then it is possible with our design. And again, no soldering. You're just going to have to do a little bit of work, get the micro switch, sand it down a little bit so that it fits in there. You pop it in there, and then you can have a really, really quiet mouse. And maybe if you guys are super interested, let me know, and we can actually do a video on this and show you actually how we can do that. It's not too complicated of a process. Let me go ahead and reassemble this guy right here. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and move into our next mouse, which is going to be the Gladius III. Now, as I noted, I'll actually bring up the list right here to confirm for you in terms of the actual different switches that are going to be compatible. And we do have this listed in terms of kind of the documentation on our site. So if you do need to be able to kind of bring up that information, you can do that. But in terms of which switches are going to be compatible, you can do the Omron D2F, Omron D2FC, and D2FP, and of course the ROG micro switches. Keep in mind that the D2FP, though, is going to be the Omron optical switches, and that's going to be exclusive to the Gladius III because the Gladius III does have that new push fit 2 base socket design. And that socket design is a requirement because the optical switch is going to be a 5-pin based micro switch. Now, one of the cool things, though, if you guys aren't familiar with kind of optical, we have actually a couple of optical keyboards. I'm using right here our upcoming Claymore 2, which is going to be an optical RX based switch. And we also have currently our STRIX SCOPE RX optical keyboard. The great thing there is that you essentially remove the mechanical element, right? You're essentially using a light for the actuation process. So it's super fast. It's more reliable in terms of the long term, and it can have a really smooth and consistent feel to it just because of the way that the mechanism's been designed, especially for us where we have a specialized stabilizer and a special stem housing for our RX-based switch. But the cool thing is you can, with this upcoming Omron optical switch that'll be available to you that you can try out with the Gladius III, you can have an optical-based switch on your mouse, and you could even also have an optical based switch on your keyboard to really allow you for that outstanding best-in-class experience when it comes to just actuation performance and latency performance. Okay, so there we go. We got our Chris back in there. All right, so next up here, we are going to jump into showing you guys our next mouse, which is going to be the Gladius III. And it will be available in both a wired and wireless based version. Probably time frame, we're going to be looking somewhere in early Q2 time frame. So definitely make sure to keep it tuned here to our social media channels if you guys want to find out essentially when it's going to be made available to you guys. Okay. But this model will essentially be able to offer you essentially tri-mode connectivity. So that means low latency, 1 millisecond response, Bluetooth, as well as USB-C hardline based connectivity, and along with our 0-click latency, which is going to be part of being able to potentially use an optical based switch, 19,000 plus DPI sensor, 1,000 hertz polling rate. Really just this is a top shelf, high quality based mouse if you're looking for something that is going to give you the flexibility to use it wired and wireless. And then if you, of course, want a wired based version, we will also have the wired based version. Now, what you're going to do for this one, this one's going to be almost exactly the same as it is on the KERIS right here. So it's just going to be pretty much 2 grommets right there. You're going to remove those 2 grommets and then access those 2 screws and pull it out. So we'll show this one last one for you here, and then we'll actually show you what the optical switches look like if you were to swap those guys out. Okay, this is actually right here, the little optical switch. So these are going to be upcoming, and we're really happy to be able to partner with Omron at being essentially the first to be able to offer you a mouse that gives you the ability to go over from a traditional mechanical based switch to an ultra high performing low latency based optical switch. So here we've got the Gladius III. All you're gonna need to do is you can see you can gain access to the bottom again, pull out the grommets, get your screwdriver. And while you're down there, you can actually also see one of the cool things that we have here. This is using our new OmniFeet design, 100% PTFE. Really outstanding omnidirectional sliding performance. You can see integrated housing right there for the wireless. And then you're right there, your tri-band baud adjustment. Pull that out. And there you can see, we've got the ROG Micro Switch, but we're gonna go ahead and pull that guy out. I'm actually see if I can do it there with my finger. You can see as opposed to using the tool. And we'll go ahead and see if we can get a little bit close there. I'll give you guys some close-up images like I did before, but there you go. You can see right there, that's the housing. And as I noted, as opposed to just the standard 3-pin, we have the 5-pin based interface. And here we have the brand new Omron optical switches, which are a 5-pin. And then you can see side by side, you've got your mechanical switch or you've got your optical switch. Very, very simple process in terms of ultimately being able to access both of those. If you want to be able to go ahead and utilize either one of those switches. Let me go ahead and mount that back in place there. And let me actually pull this up for you guys here so you can, again, get a little bit of a closer shot, understand exactly what we got going on here. So here you see side by side, we have the ROG micro switch there in the back, and then we have our Omron optical micro switch there in the front. And we're going to go ahead and take a little bit of a closer look here at what they will look like from their base configuration. So on the underside, when you're taking a look at the switch. So this is going to be that closer look there at that housing again, so that you have a clear understanding. 3-pin on the left is going to be push fit socket version 1, and then you have push fit 2, which is going to allow you to have the 3-pin or the 5-pin, so either one. And again, that's going to be first exclusively on the Gladius III. So you can see right here, we've got the Omron optical switch on the left-hand side, and then we have the ROG micro switch on the right-hand side. So again, one's a 3-pin based interface, and one is a 5-pin based interface. So that is going to be the difference between kind of how they look at the bottom. So pretty straightforward. That pretty much wraps up the 4 mice. We've gone through showing you essentially what the experience is like in terms of accessing the inside of the mouse, why you would want to change out your switches, how easy it is to change out the switches. We talked essentially about which switches are compatible. So again, Omron-based switches are going to be the default models that we talk about in terms of being interoperable and compatible. So Omron D2F, Omron D2FC, and then Omron D2FP, which is going to be optical, which is exclusive for the Gladius III, and then of course our ROG micro switch. And I'd love to hear your guys' feedback again. If you would love to maybe see us offer the ROG micro switch separately. Right now, the ROG micro switch is not available separately. Here you have actually quite a number of different switches that are available to you that you can actually try out. Here's GM2s, their GM4s, their GM8s, right, TTCs. These I can actually tell you all of them do work. They all can physically be installed. You can actually try them out, and they have different types of operating experiences. So that's going to be kind of a tricky thing as far as, you know, what is going to be the right choice for you. And a lot of it, I think, really comes down to fit, feel. So you can look for community feedback. You can see kind of what people say as far as one's being a little bit softer, one's being a little bit louder, one's being a little bit harder in terms of their actuation, and others being a little bit soft in terms of actuation. I do actually maybe want to show you though one thing here, which is going to be what happens if you do install a switch. Yeah, Duncan, sure, I can do that for you. You actually want to hear what it sounds like? I can put it side by side. I think actually I still have it installed in here where I have, yeah. So this is right here, the Gladius III, where we have the Omron optical, and then here we have the ROG micro switch, which is a mechanical. So I'll go ahead and kind of click them independently for you here. Here you can hear a little bit of difference. And if you guys maybe want to see a little bit of difference, I can show you maybe something what like a GM2 sounds like versus maybe like a GM4, and you can actually hear a little bit of the differences in terms of that. But what I did also want to show you is what happens if you put a switch in that won't work, or essentially might not actually physically be compatible. And what will generally happen is that either it'll be too tall and the top of the actual shell won't sit in place correctly, or what you actually run into is that here, the actual shell, and there's actual mechanism which is in place to actually push down on the button and the plunger, which creates the actual actuation. It won't actually work. And so here, when we go through, if I have this settled in, it's not screwed in, so give me 1 second here. You can hear it clicks, right? So let me go ahead and put in one where the switch actually would not work, and you'll actually kind of hear, you won't really hear anything. But again, the great thing here is because this is a very simple process, it's not complicated for you to kind of do this, and it's very low cost in terms of ultimately what you're trying out, right? So you can see right here, I've put it in, but you don't hear anything because you can't actually depress it, and that's because that switch is actually too tall. Okay, so Duncan, I think you said you wanted to actually hear the difference between the Omron optical and then I'll put in our ROG Micro Switch as kind of a reference. So give me 1 second here. All right. Okay, so let me actually screw this in just so we have a good consistent experience from the shell not moving about. And that is also something else that we did improve upon. With the Push Fit 2 design, we did kind of tighten up, I'd say, the tolerances a little bit. And because of the actual housing where I showed that a little bit earlier, it's actually a little bit more stringent. So it reduces a little bit more of the wobble. Okay. So here you go. So this is going to be the ROG Micro Switch is going to be on the left. So that'll be first. And then the Omron switch will be on the right. So that's going to be the optical switch. So ROG Micro Switch. And now we're going to go over to the Omron optical. ROG Micro. Slightly less, a little bit more damp, but still very crisp, audible. And then the optical. And I can tell you that the overall CPS performance for me is a little bit very close, very similar, but I was able to get a little bit more even out of that optical. Of course, optical has that kind of benefit as well, and there's something that's called it where you almost eliminate essentially any debounce delay, where there's essentially a little bit kind of signal processing that has to be accounted for when you're utilizing essentially a mechanical based switch. So there you guys go. So I think that pretty much covers everything that we wanted to dive in here into the stream. So we've given you a little bit of kind of a breakdown across the entirety of kind of some of our mice, going over from the Gladius II CORE to the CHAKRAM CORE to the KERIS to the upcoming Gladius III. All of these, of course, support our hot swap push fit based socket design. So that gives you, of course, that flexibility to be able to change things up, whether it's going to be to enhance the overall lifespan, be able to go ahead and customize your actuation experience, and ultimately just give you the flexibility to tailor your mouse the way that you'd like to, right? So a really cool feature, really cool function. I'd love to see your guys' feedback. If you guys have any questions, comments, design focuses that you would like to see. I will also note that many of the mice that we do actually ship, if you actually check in the specification page, I think I actually have a little image here, but they do actually come, many of them will come with a secondary Omron Japanese switch. And so that is a very popular kind of secondary alternate switch that people like to try out. So inside the box, you'll actually find that this is something that is included. So if you want to change it out and kind of just swap it out and see what the experience is like, you can go ahead and just open up the little bag that comes inside the mouse. Like I said, check the actual specification page to include what the included accessories are for that model. If it comes included with that, then you already essentially have a set of kind of alternate switches that you can try out and see what that experience is like. If it's, you know, something that's a little bit more audible, the actuation experience, or what it might be in terms of ultimately giving you what you might be looking for in terms of that. And again, it's just also nice to have that as an option in the event that you want to be able to go ahead and, you know, swap something out in the event something happens down the road. Yeah, so Duncan, in terms of the time frame for the Gladius 3 release, we are going to be looking hopefully for an April time frame. One really cool update that we have for you is we do have a PC DIY Facebook group. I actually am the admin for that group. I have consistent updates that we release directly there as announcements the moment that I get them available in terms of product availability. And we also launched a product tracker. So the product tracker is something that's available there within the group. It actually shows products that we've already made announcements, but that have not been launched yet. And so as soon as that's available, I'll let you actually know that, hey, that product's available. Here's the MSRP pricing. Here's the product page linking, essentially any of those great points, so that you know essentially as soon as that product is available. That is right now updated with many products, including things like the Gladius 3, Gladius 3 wireless, the Claymore 2, and many other products that we have within our lineup. So you can check that out by joining over our PC DIY Facebook group. And we also have a PC DIY Facebook group weekly stream. Normally happens actually right now, 3 p.m. Fridays, where we actually dive into the latest product announcements. So we'll talk about any new products that we're announcing, product availability updates, we'll do feature demonstrations, and we also have a really cool PC DIY Builders Spotlight, where we actually highlight your guys' PC DIY systems and kind of setups and overall system builds. And so a lot of cool things. So definitely, if you're not part of the group, consider joining. If you're wondering about this right here, yeah, this is our ROG bat list. So this right here, this is one of our gaming surfaces. We have actually quite a number of different gaming surfaces. We have our Scabbard 2, which just launched, which is a very high quality larger kind of desk mat that actually has a specialized coating, which is outstanding to repel against oil, repel against water, different types of things in terms of like that, so you don't have to worry about really kind of washing it. It's really good for long-term maintenance. This is a hard surface unit. This is the batless. We have two versions, one with wireless charging support and one that doesn't have wireless charging support. We have quite a number of different models, so you guys can definitely check those out, and they're all complemented. And they do actually have options inside of our Armored Crate software, which can actually pair up the actual gaming surface with your mouse. Okay, guys? Well, this mouse right here, if you're wondering, this is actually a variant of the Gladius II. So this is the Gladius II Core, and this is the standard Gladius II. And so one of the upgraded elements on the Gladius II is that it has this really nice, cool underglow, which I really like. This is one of my daily drivers. I think it's a perfect size mouse in terms of its overall weight, its feel, its construction, especially if you've got a little bit larger hands and you prefer, I think, a little bit more of a palm and fingertip style, although you could totally use this kind of as a little bit of a claw. Just depends on kind of what your preference is here. But Gladius 2, we have actually quite a number of models. We have a wireless model, we have this model, we have the core version. So a lot of different Gladius-based variants. And then, of course, there will be the upcoming Gladius 3 version. The Gladius 3 will be a little bit more compact, a little bit cleaner. Different materials as well will be used on the Gladius 3. All right, guys. Thank you guys for checking out this stream. Hopefully, guys, this gave you some information and insight into the ROG exclusive and innovative push-fit socket design. And like I said, it is a hot swap-based design implementation. So if you're looking to change out your switches, try out one of these mice. If you guys have any questions, feel free to go ahead and tag us on any one of our social media channels or check out that PC DIY Facebook group. With that, take care, take it easy, and enjoy the rest of your day.